good day, everybody, and it is another episode of Live Life, Be Happy 24/7. I'm so excited to be here with another episode, and with a special guest who I consider a maestro of music, my good friend Garrett Keast. Garrett Keast is an amazing world-class conductor based in Berlin who has an incredible journey, and I will have to say, Garrett electrifies concert halls and opera houses all throughout the globe. So, Garrett, welcome. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Great to see you.
Great, great.
Thanks.
I know where you're at. It's probably good afternoon in Berlin.
Yeah,
So,
it is afternoon, but I'm used to talking to people in the States. And so I'm used to talking to people saying, hey, good morning to them, even though it's already afternoon here.
awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, thank you for taking the time in your busy schedule to do the interview. And I'm extremely honored to have you here. I know we've been friends on social media for 2 years. And you know what? I'm just excited that you're able to kind of, take time in your busy schedule to do this and share with the world your journey. And it's been an incredible one because I've been watching all the amazing things that you've been doing with the orchestra. And like I said, it's some really great stuff. So what I like to do is kind of, sit back and kind of have you share your journey. And we're going to delve into a lot of interesting things doing, but please share with the world, Garrett Keast, and what you've been doing for the past years.
Yeah, sure. I'm an American. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and I kind of came up there. And when I was about 28 years old or so, I moved to New York City to kind of begin my dream and try to begin my career, and to New York City Opera and the Metropolitan Opera, and worked for the Queen Symphony Orchestra as a resident conductor. And I mean, it was a great experience, but I kind of like had to forge my way, I must say. It's like in this business of mine, and I think it's similar to you, I must say, there's no easy path. There's no like straight line, like, oh, just do this and get this degree and everything's going to work out,
Right.
I always have to explain that to young people, that it's not like becoming a doctor or a lawyer or something. Like, I really had to, I think to become a conductor or a perhaps like a kind of soloist of like a pianist or a violinist playing classical music, at least I'm talking mostly classical, but I think it's similar in most fields, is that to become like an elite level musician, solo career or conductor or something like this, it's really like entrepreneurial, and you have to really forge your path and really have to be so focused on it and so determined about it and so forthright to stick to it and be willing to stand back up and take your lumps. And like, honestly, I've been knocked down a few times pretty hard, and just like, I'm learning from that and moving on. And so I kind of love that about the career. And so I started in New York City in about 2000 and kind of began my career there. And that was a really smart decision, actually, because I met a lot of important people there over the years and found a few people that kind of basically decided to support me in terms of like, introducing me to people or believing in me, inviting me to some events and things like this. And it was an amazing experience. I was associate conductor in New York City Opera and some other things. And then in about 2011, I won a position at Deutsche Oper Berlin as a conductor there after working at the Paris Opera and some other things. And so it's been this long journey. And so that's kind of what got me to Berlin. And then, since then, and especially, about this since you've known me, I really decided the last 3 years to focus on American music, like American symphonic, American operatic music, American classical music, so to say, and that's been a real turning point now for me, because I've kind of recognized, oh yeah, you can't take the American out of me. You can hear it in my persona and the way I talk, just like you.
Yeah. And that's what I admire about you, the depth and the seriousness that you take when it comes to getting the American music, the greats. And I've seen a repertoire of things that you've done. And, that's sort of how we met, because I met you at one of the workshops that you were giving. And it was kind of about the state of affairs and what was going on in the pandemic, and how, creatives, musician artists all over the world were trying to align and adjust. And I had been like the only one in the room that was, from a very pop culture, maybe fusion jazz. But what was interesting, everybody had a story. You had some really great composers, people from Broadway. And really, it gave me a better perspective that, it's one big community out here, whatever the genre is. And I like you to kind of touch upon the importance of American music and how you got the Berlin Academy of American Music off and running.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, for me, I kind of realized that, I have a few agents. I have 3 or 4 agents, and they usually every year, I've noticed since I've been in Europe now 12 years, or almost 12 years, 11 and a half years living here, I've kind of realized because I'm an American conductor, I get asked to do American repertoire a couple times a year. Somebody say, hey, we're doing this big George Gershwin program, and we want to do Rhapsody in Blue. We're going to do the Copeland Latin American sketches or something, and this and that. And it turns out, oh, what? And we just thought you'd be perfect for it. And so my agent approaches me and says, hey, what do you think about that? And if it fits in your schedule, would you do it? And I always say yes, of course, it fits in my schedule.
Right.
And because I'm a musician, and that's what we do. We say yes when somebody offers you an opportunity to go.
That's right.
Yeah.
We show up.
And so I always loved doing those things, but I always kind of was, I think it was a mistake of mine, honestly. I used to say, I'm very happy to do it, but remember, I do Beethoven really well too. I've even conducted the Bruckner Fourth Symphony recently and was really well. This is kind of my kind of thing too, because I studied with a German conductor and blah, 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 in this classical music world. But I've since realized that I should let go of all that. I still get to conduct the standard repertoire when occasionally, and I think that'll even come back more and more as I go forward. But it's smart for me to make this my niche, to really focus on American symphonic music, American classical music, which automatically bridges a lot of gaps, automatically is kind of crossover in some ways, because there's so much jazz element to it. One thing Europeans, I'm noticing when I'm presenting American classical music in Europe, is that European audiences gravitate towards it very easily because it's got a lot of, and it can be a negative thing to say this around some circles here in Berlin even, but I don't think so. And overall, it can have a lot of popular appeal, and popular appeal sometimes to like the new music crowd or the serious, I mean, this is serious music, but the serious music crowd could be like, oh, well, it's not heady enough or it's not intellectual enough. No, it is actually. I mean, for instance, Fancy Free of Leonard Bernstein, we made the German premiere of a new version for chamber orchestra of it just 8 or 9 days ago in Elbphilharmonie in Hamburg by Garth Sunderland, this arranger, and he works for the Bernstein office. It's legit. It sounds very similar to the big symphonic version. It's jazzy, exciting, sounds like Broadway, classic 40s kind of jazz sound with Leonard Bernstein, like you can imagine, pre-West Side Story, Candide and such. Amazing piece of music. And what's great about it is that it's tricky. It's very tricky. It's mixed meter all over the place, like Stravinsky. Wow. It's very tricky mixed meter. It's nothing simple about it. It sounds simpler than it is. But what's great about that is that it turns itself into this, like, I think this, that's what's so great about classical music. It kind of goes more complex, and it makes you stretch your mind a bit. It stretches our minds as musicians. It stretches our abilities. And it's, I think, somehow more, deep in some ways and in other ways not, but I mean, it's just, I think there's something special about it, and it's completely easy for the audience to listen to, but it's also deep. It's really rich and complex, and so I really like delving into these kinds of things and bringing these to new audiences.
Well, that's great. I know the putting all this together must be very tasking for you, and you seem like you're having a lot of fun. But when I see you performing and conducting, you are having some fun, my friend. And I can see the passion, and I was like, the picture tells a story, and I can see, like I said, you're very serious and passionate what you do, and it's great that you're continuing the legacy of the greats, and you are great as well. Just want to share that.
Well, it's like, it's kind of nice. I kind of feel at my age now, after being in a career for 20 years or something, like, oh, wow, it's starting to be finally my time to start giving back and start having an artistic perspective that's interesting and giving that to audiences and giving that to the artistic community. Because there's a lot of things we're doing, I think, that are new and fresh and a little bit different. And I think that's needed and necessary. And I think that's nice, because I remember many times in the last 15, 20 years thinking, when am I going to get to the point where I can start giving back and helping like the art form move forward? And I think now maybe I'm starting to scratch the surface of that. Whereas before, sometimes you feel like as an artist, and I think you probably know this from all the people you know and are friends with and yourself, even sometimes I think as a young artist, you kind of particularly feel, well, I'm just trying to like get up the ladder a bit so I can have a place,
I'm just trying to get to point A to Z. Who has time for other stuff?
Right.
And you get that tap on the shoulder, like, hey, it's time to kind of help others out,
Yeah, right. It's yeah, of course. I mean, I always wanted to help other people out, but it's like now I can actually do a lot more, and it's kind of nice. So I think kind of middle age is great, because you start to see things more clearly. You recognize what's going on. You're kind of freed up from a lot of the earlier baggage of just being new and fresh and not knowing how to deal with the people so perfectly or the music so perfectly. You need experience in this field, and so I'm enjoying that. I'm kind of starting to become a little bit weathered, perhaps, you know.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you. Now, you mentioned giving back, and I know we had a brief conversation about a brilliant composer and a good friend of yours by the name of Mr. Anthony Davis, better known as the Dean of African American Operas, who's, what's interesting, he's currently alive. And I wanted you to kind of share with our international audience his creative musical masterpieces and everything that we don't know about Mr. Davis.
Anthony Davis, he's a great gentleman, wonderful, warm, lovely gentleman, and really a master of his art form, of his composition skills, his writing music, writing both symphony orchestra works for symphony orchestra and chamber orchestras and for voice, and several, like you said, he's the Dean of American Opera in a way. This is like he's written several big operas. One is the Malcolm X, which was premiered in the 80s at New York City Opera. He used to live in New York for a long time, and he what was the other, the more recent one is the what is it, Central Park 5.
Okay.
He won the Pulitzer Prize in 2000, I think it's 2020, March of 2020. They announced him winning the Pulitzer Prize in music, the big prize, for his opera Central Park 5, which is this. You might. Do you remember this story? I won't go into it, but it's a terrible story that happened, and it was. And I hate to say, it's also very, very timely in terms of Donald Trump was involved in the story in a not such a nice way, I don't think at all. And anyway, it just really shows you the times those were in the 80s, but also that we're still in some of those situations quite strongly, and especially with the Black Lives Matter movement. And amazing story. And so anyway, what's really neat is that he's having a big resurgence now. He's had another big opera of his premiered in Chicago Lyric Opera back in I think in the 70s. So he's had several operas. Even and he was talking to me. I visited him last year. I was conducting in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And he's become a friend a bit. And so I went down to visit him and his wife. We had lunch together, a long, nice lunch at their favorite place in San Diego, where he's a professor of music at the San Diego State University, I believe, for several years. And so he loves living down there where he's in the sun. And he's a great guy, great character. And he was even telling me he has several operas that are like comedies and such. And so it's great to hear, because he has lots of really serious social justice influenced operas too.
All right. I think you've recently done one called, premiered one of his work called "You Have the Right to Remain Silent." And can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we made the European premiere of not all of his piece, "You Have the Right to Remain Silent," but the main movement, the first movement of the piece, with my ensemble, the Berlin Academy of American Music, which is a chamber orchestra I founded, and we founded here in Berlin about 2 years ago. And what's great about Anthony is he's a jazz pianist. He's met everybody. He used to live in the city and jazz and play jazz with everybody, and knows that whole scene, but knows classical music extremely well too.
Wow.
And you could feel the influence of Stravinsky, I think, certainly in his music and other things. So this piece is called "You Have the Right to Remain Silent." And it's really interesting. The orchestra speaks in it, and it's really a social justice piece about his experience as a Black man.
Right.
It happened, I think, 35 years ago, like maybe his late 80s or early 90s. He and his wife's a white woman. They were driving to a jazz gig of his where he's going to be playing piano.
Okay.
And he was pulled over by the police, and he was kind of frustrated because he's sitting there going, "We're going to be late." And he was telling his wife, kind of, this is annoying, of course. And she said, "Anthony, take it easy. He has his gun out."
Wow.
And so he was, they were both, of course, in a serious situation. And he was approached by the police, and they told him that he looked like somebody else. And they, basically they locked him up for the evening all night long. Somebody else had done something. They were looking for somebody else. They just, the typical kind of thing. They just saw a Black man. They thought maybe he was the guy, and he just got locked up for the evening. No apologies, nothing at all. And he missed his gig. And it was a really scary evening, got into his head a lot. And he was at gunpoint for, I think 10 minutes or something. So it was a really, unfortunately, a all too typical story, but a poignant story, especially at these times. And it's interesting to present that kind of piece here in Germany, in Berlin, where it's not as diverse here as the States. It's really interesting to me as a white man who grew up in where George Floyd also grew up, about the same age, in Houston, Texas. I think it's fascinating to see how the Germans are interested in this topic, but in some ways it's not as diverse here ethnically, racially, and I think we have a lot of, in the States, we gain a lot from that. It also makes, maybe it's, in some ways it's difficult for us, obviously, at these points to kind of like bring all that together, but really fascinating for our audience and to talk about that. And we had a couple people discussing it before the performance. And anyway, Anthony Davis's piece, You Have the Right to Remain Silent, and you can listen to it on Spotify, or you can stream it very easily. There's a piece. Are you in Boston?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, there's a Boston Modern Orchestra project, another ensemble similar to ours in some ways. And they premiered, I don't know if they premiered it, but they made the premiere recording of it. It's a really good recording.
I definitely have to check it out, and definitely when you get a chance, I'd like to meet Mr. Davis, because it sounds like he has an amazing story. Have him on the show as well,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. With that,
yeah,
because I think everybody should have an opportunity, to voice, their story. And sometimes the stories are, I don't say bad or good, but they're interesting,
yeah,
and they can help shape, a lot of things. And I feel in the creatives of today, tomorrow, and even yesterday. So, we're always evolving.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're always.
Yeah,
definitely. So, with that said and done, before we come to a closure, I'm huge on supporting my guests as well as my international audience. So we like to know, where can we find Garrett Keast? What project are you working on? I know I'm going to get links from you as well. So you have the platform, my friend, and, kind of expand on that.
Well, at the moment, what I'm most excited about, I have some dates coming up, of course, in the books and next week and such, but what I'm really most excited about is this new orchestra you mentioned, and I mentioned a little bit, the Berlin Academy of American Music, which is a chamber orchestra of about 32 players usually, but also we have some engagements coming in the future, which we think will be a full symphony orchestra as well, with 55 players or something.
Okay.
But for instance, the orchestra just played in the Elbphilharmonie, which is gorgeous. I know you saw the photos.
I saw it. It reminded me of the Guggenheim.
Yeah, it's a spectacular place.
Right.
I definitely recommend to your audience, just Google the Elbphilharmonie, Hamburg. It's a spectacular building. It's built on top of an old warehouse.
Okay.
And the concert hall is actually 10 floors up. The bottom of the concert hall is 10 floors up. You have to take a big elevator to get there. There's an amazing escalator for the audience that goes up. And it's a spectacular place, fantastic acoustics there. Brand new, opened in 2017. And it's our second time we've been invited to play the ensemble, the orchestra. And we had a sold out audience. We played a really interesting program, I thought. We opened with a piece by Igor Stravinsky, a fun piece called the Circus Polka for a young elephant. Okay. Really fresh, fun piece. Even has some very funny and even a little bit of jazz elements to it. Then we played a piece by Craig Urquhart, who's a great friend of mine, who was Leonard Bernstein's assistant for several years. A beautiful, sublime, melancholy, but gorgeous piece of his. Only 6 minutes long, Adieu. And then we played a brand new, well, not brand new, but it was the German premiere of Caroline Shaw's Watermark Concerto, a piano concerto, which is very fresh and warm and special. And we were very proud to make the German premiere of that. Then I already mentioned the Fancy Free, and this is what I think we should really be doing. Like Bernstein's Fancy Free, it's like I said, it's jazzy, it's upbeat, it's exciting, it's bluesy, it's classical and jazz, really fully mixed. And I think it's just spectacular. So what I'm really happy about is I sent you some links. I sent you some recordings. You can play a little bit of us if you like. And I think the orchestra is really coming along and playing it really well, really fresh, really stylish. And then we played a new piece by this Israeli-American composer, Avner Dorman, Tanya Deris, which is thrilling, fast, exciting. Second time it's ever been played. And then we just finished with Candide Overture, and the audience went wild and had a great time, and got the impression we're probably going to get to go back there next year. And it's just exciting because it's a brand new orchestra, and I never thought I was going to start an orchestra. Wow. But it happened because of the pandemic, and there were a lot of bad things that happened in the pandemic, but there were some good things too. And so
of course.
Yeah.
You would have never known. I mean, when I kind of listened to some of the things that you're doing with the orchestra, conducting that, they're fairly new. I mean, everybody sounds pretty seasoned. I mean, you're doing a great job, with your leadership and the direction that you're taking the music. So I have to say, amazing and phenomenal with that.
Thank you. Well, it's what I do all the time, but it's different when you have your own orchestra to work with. It's really exciting. Yeah.
All right. So before we say goodbye, I always ask my guests to share a quote that will inspire our listeners as they navigate through their own life's journey, and can wrap around them and say, hey, we see this amazing individual doing some incredible things, and you know what, this is what I consider, like you said, giving back to the community to kind of help them along the way. So take the time and ponder and share your
quote. Well, I think what I would quote is what my father was very independent minded. He still is. He's still alive. My father's 80 this year.
Wow.
And he's starting a new business even this year. And he's he's riding his bicycle to work, and his work is 8 miles away. He's riding his bicycle to work and back a couple times a week.
Oh.
And he's working still. He's not retired at all. And so he's a big character, a big personality, and friendly guy, but also just really was inspiring to me, because as a young age, what he told me always the most very regularly, he would say, Garrett, do what you love. Find something you love to do. It's more important than making a lot of money. Find something that you absolutely are passionate about, that you really want to do. That's the most important thing to do. So I think there's a quote in there somewhere.
Well, thank you for sharing. Your father's a great man. I mean, my mom's around that age, and she has a lot of life, and it seems as though the folks before us, they kind of decoded this thing which we call life, because they're living,
Right.
All right. But I know you're a busy person, so I just want to say goodbye. But we're going to call you back again, in a few months, because I always like to invite the guests to see what they're doing and to kind of be on top of things. But Garrett, I just want to say continue being great and doing the amazing things that you're doing, because we need music. And I say music is an international language, regardless of the genre. Like I said, this is what heals the planet,
Agreed. Absolutely.
All right, then. My friend, take care and enjoy the rest of your day now.
You the same. Have a great day, Jim.